Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to echo many of the points raised by my honourable friend, the Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. Like her, I am a conditional supporter of this bill. Whilst I welcome its intent, I would like to raise a few questions regarding its implementation and its true impact on reducing fraud and error within the system. Members on the Conservative benches understand three core principles: the importance of promoting personal responsibility, the importance of law and order, and of course the importance of reducing the burden of an overreaching state and ensuring that taxpayers' money is spent efficiently. I am pleased, therefore, the Secretary of State, through bringing this legislation, appears to have accepted the long-standing arguments advocated by this side of the House. This bill, much like the policy paper of the previous government, is both necessary and overdue. It is a scandal that fraud and error in the DWP benefit system has reached such levels. Since the pandemic, the UK taxpayer has overpaid £8 billion due to lack of proper provision for the DWP to thoroughly investigate cases of fraud and error. This bill is maintaining the focus of the previous government's policy paper to fight fraud in the system. Under the work of the now Shadow Chancellor, the DWP saw a 10% drop in fraud and error within the system, which led to savings of over £2 billion between 2022 and 2024. This was achieved through the department recruiting over 2,000 review agents and also hiring 1,400 counter-fraud professionals. But unfortunately, due to the time constraints at the end of the last parliamentary session, the Shadow Chancellor was not able to carry out the modernisation of information gathering powers and also broaden the scope of cases that could lead to civil penalties. I have no doubt that had those Conservative policies been fully implemented, fraud and error levels would be lower than they are now. Now, turning to the bill itself, while I support the principles, I do seek clarifications from the Secretary of State on several key points. Firstly, can the Secretary of State guarantee that this bill will not distract her and the Department from much-needed reforms to counter benefit conditionality? Getting into work, getting a job is the best route out of poverty, and it's the best route to ensuring we have a more socially mobile society. So, turning back to my point, if the Secretary of State can she guarantee this bill will not distract her and the Department from much-needed reforms on benefit conditionality, including work on health assessments and also increasing incentives for people to find work? Secondly, my instinctive belief in personal liberty means that I believe provisions allowing access to individuals' bank accounts must be handled with caution. Can the Secretary of State therefore confirm that such measures will only be used as a last resort and the independent person appointed by the Cabinet Office will be given full oversight and report transparently on the use of these powers? Thirdly, the bill proposes the restriction of driving licences for those committing fraud against the DWP. However, what alternative deterrents does the Secretary of State propose for those who do not drive? HMRC and the CMS already have these powers. I would like to see the independent person assess whether these measures are as impactful at the DWP. Fourthly, Gareth Davies, Comptroller and Auditor General for the National Audit Office, wrote last year that the forecast shows that DWP no longer expects universal credit fraud and error to remain the levels seen before the COVID-19 pandemic. In response, the DWP explained that this was because there has been an increasing propensity for deceit across British society. I do hope that the Secretary of State will push back against this defeatist culture within the DWP, and that my constituents in Mid-Leicestershire do not continue to foot an astronomical bill for people committing fraud in the department. And finally, to gauge what is the correct path when dealing with fraud and error in the system, will the independent person conduct a review to determine whether the provisions in this bill are just as effective as the Conservative-led policies of the previous government? So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, as a Conservative, I support the intent of this bill. It is shocking that fraud and error is at current levels. However, I urge the Secretary of State to work collaboratively with members on all sides of the House to ensure that individual freedoms are respected, that the bill does not distract from wider welfare reforms, and that the measures in this legislation deliver a long-term reduction in the welfare bill.